My special guest today is Boo Hewerdine. Boo is an Ivor Novello Award nominated songwriter and producer. He achieved international acclaim for his song The Patience of Angels, which was sung by Eddi Reader, with whom Boo has written for time and time again. He also co-writes with Kris Drever and has written for K.D. Lang, Sia, David McAlmont and many others, as well as releasing album after album of fantastic solo records. We spoke about his love of collaboration and creative adventure, the story behind his hit song The Patience of Angels, where songs come from for him, the job of being a songwriter and his career so far. So please enjoy this podcast, subscribe and thank you for being here. Today on the Songwriting for Songwriters podcast, my guest is Boo Hewerdine. How are you, Boo?
I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay considering, yeah. It's a lovely day.
It is a lovely day.
Yeah, I'm in Glasgow and it's quite sunny for Glasgow today. So
Cool. How long have you been in Glasgow for?
4 years. So.
Fantastic. What's the music scene like up there? Is it a good scene to be a songwriter up there?
It's amazing, yeah. It's partly what I've worked for many years with Eddi Reader, and through that I met lots of other people, but I've also got my favourite engineer lives here, my friend from school, best friend from school lives here. So it just seemed obvious, really. So
fantastic.
I love it here. So
fantastic. And are you working on a new album at the moment or anything like that? Are you?
No, I've just finished lots of touring with my friend Brooks Williams and with Eddie, just done an Irish tour. So I'm just having a rest today. It's my day off. I'll start the new album tomorrow. So, but I've been producing lots of people. I'm just working on a running order today with someone who I've just produced and stuff like that. But I need a bit of a rest, you know?
Yeah, it can get like that. With I do a lot of production with other people too. Actually, which leads me to a question I was going to ask you. Actually, you are very well known for your collaborative work, whether it be through songwriting or through production. How does that influence you as a songwriter, working with other people and producing other people's records?
In a funny sort of way, it doesn't really. When I do my own records, it's this sort of little pod of meanness. So, but I do like working with other people, and all my friends are musicians and songwriters and stuff. So, and I run lots of sort of songwriting camps and workshops and stuff. I like to sort of, I'm nosy. I like to be involved in what people think. So the person I was speaking to this morning is a woman called Zan Tyler, who I've just, well, about a month ago we finished her record, and we're now talking about what she does next and stuff. And it's just nice not to think about yourself all the time.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? There's a lot to gain in collaboration and being, I suppose, because also from my point of view, of hearing about people that have been on your workshops and people that you've worked with, it seems you have a lot to give. You're very generous with your time and your giving kind of guidance and expertise to other people's work. That's obviously important to you.
Yeah, it just seems if you've learned stuff normally by trial and error, making terrible mistakes in the past, it's not secret, and if it can help somebody else, it's really it's very, I suppose, rewarding. I guess I haven't thought about it too much, but I know people who are quite isolated and stuff and make really good work, but it's just not how I'm not like that, really.
I suppose as well, being in a band early on, the Bible and other bands, is like you learn to. It's not all about you, is it? There's many songwriters that come from just the singer-songwriter point of view, but if you're in a band, you're naturally collaborative and share things. So that's just the way, the entry point into music and creativity.
It is, and to be honest, it's led to adventures, and I like an adventure. I mean, the fact meeting Eddie and working with Eddie for so long, the tour we just did in Ireland, I've toured with her many, many, many times, played with her for years, but it was probably my favourite tour that I've done with her in Ireland, and there was one particular gig that was just so magical, and I wouldn't have had those adventures if I'd been sort of more guarded and things to myself. So I like
Yeah,
having a nice time.
yeah, absolutely. But I think you're right that being open to adventure with people is part of the process.
But I also find that when I'm working on my own stuff, I can enter that little world of just of meanness. And so surprisingly, working with lots of other people doesn't really affect the little journey I make with my own records.
Okay.
So which is fine.
I've been really enjoying listening to Flowers, your EP, and your last album, Understudy.
Yeah.
I was driving home last night from a gig. You know that I always love listening to music, and before I do these podcasts, I tend to kind of deep dive an artist and just be in the car and driving along. And as I've always thought about your songwriting, that it's like such beautiful, like nursery rhyme like melodies, which feel very kind of like effortless and free. But also, I always feel like I'm being led by your melodies into this kind of like. It might have just been my experience. I hope other people have it as well. But the melodies lead me into a space where I think you're like talking directly to me, and you know, there's your lyrics are kind of very, I find, very kind of generous. So quite often, whilst I was driving last night, listening and have been listening, I've been thinking, oh, Boo's telling me something here. He's giving me some life advice, or like he's talking directly to me, and I guess one of my question is, in terms of the lyrical, which I think is a very generous. I think you're a generous person through your collaboration with others. But I think you're a generous lyric writer. Are you aware of what you are as a lyric writer, or your kind of personality as a lyric writer?
Oh, I guess so. It's something that I keep exploring. A lot of those songs that you're talking about were um, there were reflections on my old man who died during COVID, and I couldn't visit him because he was in a home and stuff like that. And so uh, I guess it was looking for the little bits of light that happen even in a situation like that. So I never want people to feel gloomier after listening to what I've written. So yeah, they are me. That's me. Well, it's nice if you feel that way about it. There's a thing that always hangs in my mind. There are several things, but one is Paul Simon quote said that songwriting is the art of making the complicated sound simple.
Nice.
That's always in my mind. So I want it to feel very welcoming and easy to listen to, but there's normally something a bit sort of more complex behind it. For example, there's a song, "The Thing You Love," is it's just when I went, the first big gig I went to when I was about 16 was Dr. Feelgood, and I stood too near the speakers.
Yeah.
I've had tinnitus in my left ear ever since. And that's a song about that, and also about the fact that my dad was losing his hearing, or blah 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 blah. But it's called "The Thing You Love." You know, can sometimes hurt you, and that's sort of been interesting. That I did I was in a band and everything like that, and it was when we weren't a particularly loud band, but we were a rock band, and it wasn't always very comfortable and stuff. And I was just thinking, why do I do this thing that has damaged me?
Mm. Mm-mm.
But when you listen to the song, it just sounds quite simple. But I actually do mention Dr. Feelgood in it. I do mention real things in it. So yeah, so
I
there's
think
always sort of subtext to them.
Yeah, I think there's what I'm saying is true. Is what I mean there. Like you've obviously the insight into that song there. You know, which one might miss on first listen, and the insight, I really enjoyed hearing that insight. But what I really love is how you condense, to me, it seems that you condense these experiences into something which is like almost like a little gift. You know, like why does the thing you love sometimes hurt you? It's like that's a really beautiful thing to condense those ideas down to, and for the listener to think about. And that's what I mean, I think, in the generosity, which is like you're singing your song and having your experiences, but there's also a kind of present to the listener, which is it's not true of every songwriter, you know.
But it's really important to me that someone sitting in an audience goes, "Oh yeah, I get that." Or that's the whole point. I think it's sort of communication, and it's not like writing a novel or a screenplay. You've got 3 minutes to impart that, and what happens is you try and compress the ideas until, this is going to sound pretentious, but I think about it sometimes. It's like if I get a line that says a lot, it feels like you've made a little diamond, you've squashed these ideas into just 3 or 4 words. And my favorite line that I ever came up with like that, and it's my wife really likes this line and is thinking of having it tattooed on herself. There's a song I've got called Dragonflies, and she's in fact got a dragonfly tattooed on her because of the song. And in fact, lots of people I know have got dragonflies tattooed on them, including Kevin, who plays bass in Eddi's band. But the line I thought said a lot was, each of us know in our heart we must go, that's what beauty is. And that's probably my favorite line I ever wrote.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, and it's true. But I think you know, just you're someone who manages to condense these things into those like lines, and it's a real gift, that is. So as a listener, I say thanks for that, Boo. I appreciate it. It was a bloody lovely drive back.
Oh, this is difficult talking about yourself. I always feel like you sound really sort of yeah.
Well, it's one of those things where I think the kind of purpose of this podcast is to kind of, you know, obviously as a songwriter myself, I'm sort of studying you as a songwriter, but also, and as a fan, but there's also like that, you know, sometimes the purpose of this is to kind of talk about the process and sort of explore it, because I know what you mean. It is a bit uncomfortable, but it's
it is, because you want it to speak for itself, but it is the process. Whereas if an idea occurs to me, it might sit in my head for a long time, but the actual song might come out quite quickly. But it's about compression, or compressing the idea into that tiny space that a song allows you to have. There's in my band there were the two McCall brothers, and their dad was Ewan McCall, and he wrote First Time Ever I Saw Your Face, which is a fantastic song, but it's only 12 lines, you know. And he creates this entire love affair and life with someone into 12 lines. So it's a different discipline from, you know, you can have really long Bob Dylan type songs, and I have had some longer songs, but I enjoy that discipline. There was a lovely project that I was asked to take part in. It's a thing called Miniatures. Morgan Fisher from Mott the Hoople in 1980 made an album called Miniatures, where every song was only a minute long.
Brilliant.
And there was somebody decided to do an updated version of that, and to try and write a song that says all you want to say in a minute is a fantastic thing to try and do. I really, really enjoyed that. So I'm kind of drawn to miniatures as a concept. You know, if I try and say it in as few words as possible. So
I love that. It is one of the hardest things to do, but it's a worthy exercise to do it, for sure. Because I think, you know, like you say, complex things simplified is communication, isn't it? Because we feel whatever we feel and experience in life, it can be complicated, but I guess the job of a songwriter or an artist is to try and feel those experiences and put it into a relatable form, and that's what we're here for.
Yes. Yes, and you can sort of tell, when I listen to a lot of songs, you can sort of tell the songs that come from some sort of personal experience, but the writers I really like then translate that into sort of something general. The record I'm working on sequencing today is a lovely guy called Louis Cormack, who lives in Cork in Ireland, and he the song that sort of swung me behind his project is a song called Local Guy, and it's about him getting his bicycle repaired, but it's not about him getting his bicycle repaired, and it's really using this experience he had where he broke his bike and he's getting it fixed in the shop next door to where he works because it's convenient and stuff, and he says all these really everyday things, but it's a song about community, you know. It's brilliant. So
yeah, we'll definitely check that song out when it's released. That's There's this track on, well, the EP Flowers, because I understand that, I think I understand that Understudy and Flowers are kind of, I mean, all your work is obviously relatable, but the EP is kind of aligned to that Understudy album. Is that right? Like, it's a kind of...
It is. I'm very lucky with the record company I'm with. He always encourages me to be putting things out all the time, and if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't. But they were songs that happened during that time, but that didn't quite fit into the narrative of the album.
Sure.
But had actually some of my favorite ever things I've ever done have ended up on EPs and so forth. But when you're making an album, you don't want it to turn into a K-Tel greatest hits sort of confusing thing. You want to keep it a sort of its own little world. You know, I think there's a lot to be said for what's on the cutting room floor. They can live by themselves, and one of the songs is during lockdown. I ended up writing with loads and loads of people. One of them was a woman called Yvonne Lyon, and we've been working for nearly 3 years now on a project where in Culzean Castle, near Culzean, near the castle, there's a secondhand bookshop, and on the wall they have a big display called Things Found in Books, because people bring in secondhand books to give to the shop or sell to the shop, and stuff falls out. Wow. And letters, photographs, and so forth. And so Paul McCartney in 1970 was a photograph that fell out of one of the books that someone brought in, and that's what's written on the photograph.
Wow.
So I sort of tried to imagine how the people who had the book, and so the book's not even mentioned. So it's been a beautiful project to work on. So there's a song about a packet of cigarettes of a brand that no longer exists, and all sorts of things like that. It's a beautiful source. So we've nearly finished recording now, but Yvonne and I would meet online periodically and just say, "Oh, I found another thing," and work from that. So that wouldn't have fitted onto the album, but it will be a version of that will be on the record that we are making, which is called Things Found in Books.
Fantastic. I love that.
So they all have their own, on that EP, have different reasons for existing by themselves, but they didn't quite fit into the narrative of Understudy, which was really about honoring my old man, you know. So
well, both the album and the EP are very beautiful, and the songs are fantastic. I mean, is McCartney an influence as a songwriter on you?
Well, he's in some ways, yeah. I mean, the Beatles are probably the band I, like a lot of us, are most obsessed with and interested in. I'm looking over here because I've got his lyric book, and I've got that fantastic book where every Beatles song is transcribed with what each individual instrument's playing and stuff like that. And because I was young when I first found them, they never failed to sort of amaze me. But I think everything I've ever heard, like all of us, is an influence, isn't it? But he does fascinate me because I think he's very incredibly instinctive. I had a friend, John Kelly, who I still work with, who's a producer and engineer, and he worked for years with McCartney, and he's given me some fascinating insights into the way he works. And one of the things that did interest me is that John said he often would come up with a melody before he went to his instrument.
Right.
Or the beginnings of a melody before he went to his instrument. Obviously, we all know about Yesterday and him dreaming scrambled eggs and all that. We know all of that. He dreamt that melody. But that has interested me because I think a lot of times, if we're players, we will start vamping on a chord sequence and then put a melody to it, which is great. And nearly all songs are written that way. But you're immediately trapped in a sort of harmonic prison if you do that. Whereas if you try and think of a melody away from your instrument, even the beginnings of one, that really opens up a whole world of possibilities. So that if he's influenced me in any way, was John telling me that. And now I don't necessarily go to my instrument when I want to start writing. I might come with a melody in my head, even if it's only a couple of lines, and then see where that leads me harmonically, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's a really good exercise, that, isn't it? That's sort of. But you said earlier about when you're condensing, there's like you might condense something in your head before the song comes out. Do you have like music going on in your head or ideas swimming in your head? You know, as a general kind of level of being of existence. Is that something which goes on in your head all the time?
Yes, well, it has done since I remember that when I was a kid, about 7 years old, realizing that that was happening. I didn't really learn to play anything till quite a long time later, but I remember that being something happening. And
Did that impact your decision to want to become a songwriter? You know, when did you decide to become a writer?
I think I wanted to become a songwriter really young, even though I didn't know what that was. And then you start buying records, and I became interested in the names underneath the title and where did these things come from? So yeah, it's a total accident though. I feel so lucky. It's led me to have such an interesting time. And then the other great thing is you never grow up.
Yeah, which is good and bad. Which is yeah.
I'm still the same. I mean, it's ridiculous. I'm still doing the same thing I did when I was first for the making of beginnings of a living when I was 19. I then went and worked in a record shop. We got a deal and then lost the deal and then got another one. But really, it's my whole life has been doing that, and I still have the same sense of like, right, this is the record that's going to do it, and I still get excited when I get on the tour bus and stuff. I feel very lucky. I don't think I've got an arrested development, but it's like it doesn't ever stop being a beautiful, exciting thing to be involved in, you know.
I think that excitement of it. I mean, for me as a writer, like the most exciting thing is a new song coming through. That is, you know, or making a new record when you maybe like when you've got the songs and you've maybe a third coming up to half the way in, when you know kind of what the sounds are, that excitement of a new song, knowing you've kind of got it but you haven't got it yet, but that feeling of excitement is the same thing from 13 to today, you know, which is, it fuels all the kind of you know, the harder moments, I suppose. Is that how you feel about it? Is it excited by it all still?
Yes, of course. I think the two bits that are a reward are when the song begins to exist and it sort of wriggles into being. That's really exciting. And the other reward is when you play it to an audience, and like there was a beautiful moment on the Eddi tour where someone was singing a song which happened to be one of mine, and I looked at and there was a woman and she was crying, and I thought, what a beautiful thing that someone has understood something I thought ages ago. All the stuff in the middle is the work that you have to do, and that would include recording. Although I get excited about recording, it's part of the process of getting from sitting in your room thinking of something to the other end, someone being so moved or having a good time or whatever, a stranger hundreds of miles away. So those are the rewards for me. The stuff in the middle is, I love doing it, but it's part of a process, you know, where those two bits feel like magic.
Yeah. So, I mean, from what I know and from what you've said so far, it seems like you're someone who looks for inspiration for songs and all manner of things, whether it be things falling out of books or collaborations. And then there's the kind of you on your own thing. Do you write every day? Do you write when you've got an idea? Or do you just open yourself up to whatever comes? Is there a sort of Boo process?
If there is what I've learned, although I loved during lockdown that I could write every day, I've learned to put it aside on occasion so that it comes back fresh. But if somebody asks me to write something, I will do it just then and there. I had one of the people that I've been working with for a while, and this is interesting because I don't write the lyrics, is Kris Difford. So that's four records in now. We're just getting on to the fourth one. And there was a record that we did that he wanted to write a musical.
Fancy Pants.
That's it. And he just sent me
he
sent me a text this morning saying it's amazing. Or, you know, it's like, he never sends me texts like that. He's obviously listened to it. And that would be the piece of work as a recording that I put myself into more than anything else I've ever done. It nearly broke me. And it's sort of funny because I sort of think it was so difficult to make. There were so many obstacles, so many hurdles and problems. And for him, a couple of years later, to listen to it and go, "Oh, this is really good." That was a nice feeling, but it made me realize that there's a lot of hard work to get to that. That's not really answering your question, is it? But it just occurred to me. All that text just before we spoke.
Well, it's one of those things where I think you know, whether that justifies the work level that we all go through as writers, you know, you never know. But I suppose the woman crying in the crowd, or an artist you're working with texting back that morning, getting off on the work is you know, it doesn't always like pay all the bills in certain ways, but that's feeling is you want to make people feel good, don't you? And that album's really great actually, because I've been part of Kris's songwriting courses and spoke to him on this podcast as well. But I, in my research for talking to him, I was aware of the musical. He'd mentioned it to me, and I listened to that album, and it's fantastic. It makes me it's like the Kinks, and but it's funny, but really beautiful as well. Like it, you know, there's some really beautiful moments, but it's funny and entertaining, and it's, you know, anyone who likes Boo's work and Kris's work should go and check it out, because it's quite an extraordinary piece of work, I think.
Well, yes, I would back that up. I mean, it's something like 25 tracks, and it was so. Its genesis was so difficult with for lots of reasons, and it's if you get the CD, it's very rare, because I think there's only about 100 were made before everything changed and it was withdrawn and stuff. But you can listen to it on Apple Music, I think. It's but for effort in to reward out, that is probably the biggest the biggest disparity of anything I've ever done. But I'm very proud of it, and I'd like people to hear it. Probably the record, one of the records of the collaborations that I'm most proud of, and again I was talking to him this morning, is somebody I really admire and really like. Is a guy called Duke Special. It's Peter Wilson, who's in Northern Ireland. And we worked together on an album, writing wise, called Under the Dark Cloth, which was about photography. And he went to New York to the Met, the museum in New York, to play it with a string section. I couldn't go because I got a gig with Kris Drever actually in a pub in Cheshire, where the fruit machine was louder than the PA, but I'm not bitter. But that record was, as a collaborative exercise or whatever, was the most exciting, because he took most of the hard work on, to be honest, but the recording, he had done a series of dates with the RTE orchestra in Ireland, and he didn't want payment. He just said, can I have the orchestra for 2 days? So we got this fantastic guy to do arrangements, and then sitting in Dublin hearing our songs that were recorded on phones and stuff, like coming back to me as full-blown orchestral pieces.
Yeah,
it was fantastic. And again, I would never have had that adventure if I wasn't open to collaborating with people.
Yeah,
and that's, if I am like to show off about anything, it's quite often that record I point that to people, because nobody knows that record either. So
what's that record called? We will mark it on the podcast.
Under the Dark Cloth.
Yeah,
it's fantastic work from Peter, absolutely fantastic, and it's a beautifully realized piece of work. But again, sometimes you invest yourself totally into something and it doesn't. You know, there are so many ducks in a row that have to happen for a record to be successful.
Yeah, well, success is a really interesting thing as a songwriter, isn't it? Because you know, there's I heard an interview with you actually. Someone asked the question that they were asking about like success and failure, and you said a really interesting thing, which was that because I mean, from my point of view, like, you're an immensely successful songwriter, and you just are. That's factual. Then there's those songwriters who have those enormous mega hits, and everybody thinks of them as a success. But you said something in this interview, which was that you had always kind of like just kept on pushing on and kept on working and kept on writing, and that sometimes people that had bigger successes were almost unable to make a move because the success was too big, and it became like a ghost in the room, which I think was a really interesting thing to say, because it really opened up that idea of your point of view of just do the work, write a song, do the work, write a song, collaborate, and that's the lifeblood of a songwriter, isn't it?
Yes. There came a point when I had my first child that I realized I wanted to make sure that they were okay, and I wanted to do what I wanted to do. So it became my trade. It's my trade, you know, and it's what I've paid bills for people that I love to make sure people are okay. So that's my mindset. So when success happens, which it does occasionally, and it's normally a surprise, and you get something that does well, and it means it takes the weight off for a bit. But I don't. I had a time when I was going to London and working, mainly because my daughter wanted me to, and working with pop stars and stuff like that. And it was, you know, had things that got in the charts and stuff, but it was not the same thrill as working with, by any means, by working with Eddi or with Kris Drever or Heidi Talbot. That's, you know, in terms of joy, there's no comparison. So I don't go chasing that. I go chasing the work.
Yeah. And chasing your heart, right? Chasing artists and people that turn you on, because otherwise there's
But always, and I have to be always with an eye to making sure that we're okay.
Yeah, sure.
But it's not an indulgence, you know.
Yeah.
That's important to me. So, like, if I do a gig and I turn up on my own with my tools, like a plumber, and do my gig, and it goes well, and I walk out with something that means that the rent, you know, the rent gets paid and stuff, that's a really good feeling, and I like that feeling kind of more than the showbiz stuff.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm not being po-faced or judgmental. It's just me. It's just how I am. You know, it's not.
Well, there's a great feeling to be. I think if like you say, if you think of songwriting as being a trade or a craftsman, and you're making money at your craft, whether you're I don't know, whether you're a carpenter or a fisherman or a songwriter, it's what's nice about that is it's not making it like a lofty thing. It's just like it's as meaningful or as meaningless as a carpenter and fisherman. It's just a trade, isn't it?
It's true. I think we're surrounded by. Well, it sounds going to sound, and I don't want it to sound dodgy in any way, but I think we're surrounded by art, by people doing trades and stuff like that. It moves me, you know, and I love art, and someone who's a fantastic artist, but at the same time, I don't know, I've got this sort of funny old piano over here that we found in a hotel. It was made in the 30s, and it was just somebody plonking away in the corner of a hotel. But I look at it sometimes and think, oh, what a beautiful thing. And there was no other reward from that other than the guy wanted to make a beautiful thing, you know. So
yeah. Well, this is what we leave behind, isn't it? Piano or song or experience. That's what these songs are. That we sort of walk around with our heads, is just leaving a little artifact for someone to come across.
yeah, but by the same token, I have friends who are really good at writing pop songs, are really good at it, and are really fan, and consequently have done very well at it. And I have tremendous admiration to them as well. I'm not po-faced about that at all. It's like it's just happened to be. I guess it's my comfort zone, I suppose, for want of a better word. But I have tremendous admiration for some of my pals who can knock out a number one.
Yeah. There's a craft to that too, for absolutely sure.
Totally. There totally is. And when it all marries in a perfect storm, I think that Flowers song by what's the chop Smiley? Sorry, I think that's like a perfect storm of pop chops and something else. And we used to hear those sort of things all the time when I was growing up. Like if you look at an old top 20 from 1975 or something, like nearly every single one is like a mind-blowingly fantastic piece of work. You just for me, and I don't think it's just being older, because I now hear that sort of thing in more indie sort of stuff, but that used to be just. That's why one of the reasons I love the Beatles. It's like bang, there you go, have some art.
Yeah, well, it's true, and it's that 7 year, the 7 year recording. Was it 7 years of recording where it's just insane, the movement from rock and rollers to kind of really kind of composers of modern pop and arrangement in the kind of mainstream commercial sense. It's just if you look at With Him Without You from '67 to kind of I've Just Seen a Face, which was, I don't know, '64. Like, it's just crazy, isn't it? The kind of
Just or 2.5, to be honest, because of when they started recording. It's mad. And also, I don't know, that there was a sort of expectation of musicality in the '60s, like adventure.
Yeah.
Like, you hear, I know at the end of a thing, I do this thing where I go into prisons with a couple of friends of mine and we work with people there, and at the end of the last session the guy just put on really loud, put on God Only Knows, and it's mind-blowing. What a mind-blowing thing that would be in the mainstream.
Yeah.
And then I also think there was a level, and this is where Kris Drever comes in, there was a level of lyrical invention, particularly in British music around the time of Squeeze, and particularly with Ian Dury and stuff like that.
Definitely.
But each year, there's brilliant things happening now, but in the mainstream it doesn't always excite me quite as much. But the level of lyrical effort that went into early '80s records is mental. You just have to hear an Ian Dury record and you go, oh, blimey, it's just incredible. And that was mainstream. It wasn't an obscure, some cool sort of obscure thing that you found. It was number one.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you're right. Even like, I grew up in the '90s, so like, it was slightly different, but you'd have like, Bittersweet Symphony out one week, Firestarter out the week after. Even then there was like strong statement singles that were like interesting songs and records in the mainstream. And I think due to many reasons, the mainstream is just different now, and the way of finding great music and art it's sort of everywhere all at once, and you have to kind of find it in a different way. It's not broadcast into your TV or radio in the same way, is it? It's a very different.
No, it's there and you can find it, but there have been these various periods where it's like a perfect storm of invention and popularity, which was incredibly thrilling when it happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Nirvana or something. It's like, what? I'm sure for people, I'm knocking on, so I'm sure younger people there are feeling that and stuff. But I do still. I used to work in an indie shop, so it's just by nature I just go hunting things out. And my son's the same, my son Ben, who writes music and makes records when he can and stuff. But we're always trying to sort of find little gems for each other to listen to.
Do you think that's? I was listening to an interview actually 2 days ago with Simon Le Bon, of all people. He was saying that at a certain point his daughter came downstairs one day. Sorry, he came down one stairs one day, and his daughter was listening to Six music, and he at the time just didn't want to listen to it because he was just eating breakfast or something. His daughter pointed out to him, "You don't really like music, do you? You're not listening to much music." And he had the wherewithal to kind of think, actually, you're right. I've come into this position I found myself in a position where I'm not listening to as much as I used to listen to. How important do you think it is as a songwriter to constantly be listening or find things out? Is that something that's important to you?
The music that I like to listen to is the music that sounds nothing like mine.
Okay.
So,
such as?
I really, really liked the Robbins record, Honey, that album. I really like that.
Yeah.
That sounds nothing like mine. I quite often like electronica.
Yeah.
What else? There's something just recently I really like. But that one, and I was listening to it and really enjoying it. Thinking, this is nothing like I'd ever do.
Yeah.
I just enjoy being mystified by something because I don't know how the mechanics work. Whereas if I listen to other singer-songwriters, which I will do and admire and love, I know how it was put together.
Sure.
I've always really enjoyed listening to stuff where I go, I don't, what the hell's that? Or like Winged Victory for the Sullen. I love them. And like me and my son went to watch them at the Albert Hall and stuff like that. Nothing like I'd ever do. So, but it's just, That I kind of like it if I don't know how it's working.
Yeah, keeping the mystery in the room for you as a music fan.
You do get appreciation from writing a lot, and you can go songs that you used to love when you were young. You now listen to them and you go, that's what he's done there. Or, oh, that doesn't take it away, but I do like when you were young and you didn't know how anything worked, and you're playing a record to a friend and you go, oh, hang on, here comes the good bit.
Yeah.
You kind of know what it is now.
Well, I agree. There's a bit where the more you know, in a way, you kind of your experience of the enjoyment of it changes because you're analysing or working out what someone's done, or you know what they've done. So that, like you said, the first time you hear God Only Knows, for example, when it was like, what the hell is, it was like, wow. But I suppose when you if you're a songwriter and you made records, you it's like the kind of Wizard of Oz thing, isn't it? You see behind the screen, so
it doesn't always make it. Well, actually, when they played God Only Knows, it's like you can hear the beautiful chord. It's the best chord sequence in pop music. Brilliant, and the key change and the weird middle bit and all that, and the beautiful thing. And when I was young, it was just this overwhelming. But hearing it now and knowing kind of what they were doing doesn't diminish it in any way at all. In fact, it enhanced it. But I am always interested in what the hell's that.
Let me ask you a question about. I mean, I've got a couple of questions here actually in regards to like your work, but a lot of people who may not be so familiar with your albums and your collaborations.
That would be everybody.
Well, they will know The Patience of Angels because it's one of those songs that everybody knows. What was the influence behind writing that, or the story behind that song?
Okay, I lived in a horrific flat above a butcher shop, which was horrible because you could you heard chopping first thing in the morning, and then you'd smell death coming up through the floors. But it was on a bus route, and buses would go by and they'd be at the same level as my window. But that's the start of the song, but it was mostly because I used to see this woman pushing a pram and I was just curious about her life. She looked really stressed and I assumed she was a single mother. So I just wrote that song for her. And it was kind of interesting because when it started, I thought, Patience of a Saint, we tried the Patience of a Saint. And I thought, well, I don't mind idioms, but I thought that sounds a bit lumpy and po-faced. So I just sort of stuck angels in there, and it suddenly, I do remember it just went bing like that in my mind. And then I made a recording of it. I had a lot of belief in it, and I played it to the Bible, and they didn't like it.
Okay.
And it was quite a long journey for it to be heard by Eddi, and then for it to be taken. Then she went out to America to make a record. She signed to Warner's to make a record with Mark Nevin, who was the writer in Fairground Attraction, and she had a fantastic set of musicians, like people in Steely Dan and stuff like that, and they had a disagreement. I don't know what the disagreement was, but he decided to leave the session. And then she remembered these songs that she'd heard me singing, particularly at a gig at the Borderline she came to see, and she got me to sing Patience of Angels down the phone to her. And then about 4 days later, they played me the recording. And then she said, have you got any more? And that's her album called Eddi Reader. I think there's 5 songs on there it came from me singing down the phone. Quite a most incredible set of circumstances that led to you even hearing that song, because it nobody was interested at first. But
wowzers.
It was quite gratifying. It then got nominated for what they called an Ivor Novello Award as Best Song of the Year, and there was a cock up, and it was printed that it had won. I've got an Evening Standard where it says it had won, but it didn't, and then there was all sorts of kerfuffle.
Oh, crikey!
Incredible adventures, that song.
Well, it should have won.
It's Celine Dion one. She doesn't need any more awards.
She's got enough. But I mean, yeah, that phrase, you're right, that phrase, "The Patience of Angels," it is such a... I mean, I've thought about that song a lot over the years, just kind of almost in a way, like, listening to the song and enjoying the song, but just thinking about that phrase of like trying the patience of angels, and just again, like it's like we spoke about earlier in the podcast about that condensing of ideas into a phrase which is easy to relate to. I mean, that's one of those gorgeous lines in pop,
But she's the angel, the woman, and also it was something where I was like, the chorus is just the same phrase twice, and I thought, is that cheating? And then I went, no, that's magic. Yeah. And I suddenly thought, that's all these songs that I love where the chorus is just say it twice. It's a chorus so people can sing along. And it was, in fact, that was the song where the woman was having a little cry. Radio 4 decided they wanted to make a program about it about 8 years ago. Okay. And it's what's called I can't remember what the program's called, but they decided that it would be a good idea to try and find the woman.
Wow.
So we had to walk up and down the street knocking on doors. So it was not a happy experience. I didn't enjoy that.
No. Did you find her?
No. Excuse me. Are you the woman in the song?
Oh, but don't you think that? I mean, I think it's like very beautiful that someone in the world is this woman she's probably heard that song, and she's
That's it. And it was a song for want of a better word, a song for single mothers. That's what it was, because I was like, it was in that period where bizarrely they decided that all the world's problems were down to single mothers, which was like insane, a sort of Tory outburst from John Major saying that was the main problem we were facing. It's like
they'll try anything on this lot. They'll really will try.
Blame anyone. It's not me. It's you.
So if you were to put forward, again, someone who may not know your work, or actually even a question for you yourself, what 3 songs that you've written would you say you'd put forward to kind of show someone your work, or what 3 songs do you think are the ones where you've really kind of nailed who you are as a songwriter and you're most proud of? Is that possible to kind of
possibly because I feel like a work in progress, they tend to be more recent ones, but I could go back to a Bible song which would be like Honey Be Good or something. That was a pretty magic coming together. I like that one. There's a song very recently which I wrote with somebody who I met on a workshop, and he's a lovely man called Brian Johnson, who's not a musician or singer himself, but he has really good ideas. And we decided during lockdown to write songs inspired by Vivian Mayer, the street photographer from America and from the 60s and 70s and 80s a little bit, who took these wonderful street photographs but never showed them to anyone ostensibly. And then she died, and all her work was found after she died. And I love her work. It's just incredible. I've got loads of books of her stuff. She was a very interesting woman. She pretended to be French. She wasn't French, like she was a very eccentric person. But the pictures are really. She had like a Hasselblad, so she wasn't holding a thing up to her eye, so people weren't self-conscious. They didn't know they were having their photograph taken. So they're caught off guard, and they're a great unwitting testimony to the times and the social world of the time. But there's a song that I wrote with him, which is called "The Night Is Young," which, in terms of chordal melodic stuff, felt really. I love singing it live. I really like it, and it's like a summation of all the sort of chordal things I've been looking at over the years. I really like it, and it's his imagery. We wrote the words together, but it's largely his imagery, and I like his take on visuals, which is a bit different from mine. So I wouldn't have written it without him. So I like that. So the third one, I guess Patience of Angels, just because of the huge adventures it's taken me on. It's taken me all over the world. Because of that, led to me working with Eddi and then going everywhere, including Australia, where I met my wife and stuff. So that song, I never get tired of singing that song. I really like it. And some nights when I'm playing it, I suddenly hear it afresh and I go, that's all right, actually. Yeah.
Well, I've been in the room with you when that's had the pleasure of supporting you briefly at a gig, and it was in Winchester actually, at the Railway Inn. We had a little upstairs gig, and
Yes.
I saw you play that song, and it was like, you know, the energy of that. I mean, the whole gig was brilliant, but that song, the energy of the song, you could watch people like a Mexican wave almost, like the energy sort of transaction of that song coming out to the crowd was like dominoes being fallen to the power of the song. It was a beautiful thing to watch.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's what it's about. That's why
Yeah,
that's it. There's nothing that, and the other thing that you get that from is if you're lucky enough that somebody decides to record one of your songs and you hear
yeah,
it for the first time and their take on it, that never goes away. It's a bit of a shame now because I used to be able to have CDs and albums, but a lot sometimes it's only digital,
yeah.
and I've got I've got all that stuff in a lockup because there's no room, and we just live in a little flat with my wife, so I've got all of that in a lockup, and that never goes away when a CD arrives or you've heard someone's done one of your songs.
Yeah, that's amazing. When you're writing with all these different people and collaborators, is I mean, obviously keeping busy is a nice thing as an artist, but do the deadline, you know, obviously there's deadlines to things. From a songwriting point of view, rather than a production point of view, or from a songwriting or co-writing point of view, is a deadline a useful thing to have, do you think?
Yeah, it's magic. I've been very lucky to write songs for a program called The Verb, which is on Radio 3, which is like an arts program about words. And they will ask me to write a song on occasion, and they'll just give me a couple of days to come up with a song, and they'll give me a subject. And what really interests me is you don't want to let anyone down. So there's that, but you immediately fly into it and come up with things that I really like. Some of my favorite songs of recent years have come from that pressure. And it made me realize that as artists or as writers, we wander around waiting for inspiration. But if someone asks you to do it, you do it. And it's made me realize that some of my favorite artists are able to apply that pressure to themselves.
Yeah.
A really interesting interview with Bob Dylan, like, how do you write songs? Somebody asked, and you think you'd say, oh, I could wander into a field and I wait for the muse. And he goes, well, I listen to what I've got so far, and I think, well, if I need a rocker, I'll write a rocker. If I need a ballad, I'll write a ballad. And so the trick to being a forward-moving artist, I think, is to be a self-commissioner,
Yeah.
and to give yourself the same sense of deadline that you get when someone asks you to do. For example, if someone asked you to write a song for a wedding for next week, you would do it, wouldn't you? You wouldn't say, oh, I didn't quite pull it off. You'd just do it.
Yeah.
So that sense of responsibility you get from other people, I think great artists are able to give that to themselves. But a lot of people that I work with and I meet are sort of floundering at first because they've got all these ideas, but they don't know what to do with them. But you have to, for something to exist, there has to be a bit of pressure for it to come out. You know?
Yeah, I think so. I think also sometimes, I mean, you're absolutely right. If you can give that to yourself as a songwriter, I think that is a very good thing to do without going completely neurotic. And sort of, but I think also when you like that radio's program you just suggested, and I've felt this myself or working with others when the deadline, what's really great is that you have to pull something out the bag. Like, I suppose, like, you know, like in the old days of the 60s or 70s, where it's like you've got half a day to record the next single or whatever. You kind of have to turn up. And sometimes when you're in that position of pressure and deadline, you don't know what you're going to pull out of the bag. But that is quite exciting sometimes to not know what.
Well, the thing that you realise is that the person that is in the way of doing that is yourself.
Yeah.
Because it's all there. If you are creative, it's all bubbling away in your subconscious. Like sometimes you say, like God only knows, he says he was written. They often talk about that from the stage, saying he wrote it in 7 minutes. He did write it in 7 minutes, but he also wrote it probably in 2 or 3 years of some sort of all sorts of different ideas bubbling around in his subconscious. But he just opened the tap and out it came.
Yeah.
If you open the tap and there's nothing there, nothing comes out. So that's what I think is really interesting about that sort of pressure. When I work with people and they come to me to be mentored or whatever, I will often suggest that they write something, a set of songs that are thematic, just to give them a sort of universe to work within, and give them also musical constraints. The great thing about constraints is that if you're creative, you push against them, and there becomes this sort of interesting tension. Whereas if you've got an endlessly blank canvas, that's like, what do we do? So I was talking this morning with woman Ann Tyler, whose record I worked on and helped write some of it. Every song is about a strong woman. It was her idea, but knowing that that was where we lived as writers made it with every time we met, something happened. Whereas if you meet people and what we're going to write about today, and you go, I don't know, that could be very difficult. And all great art around us, until very recently, all great art was commissioned, all of it. People didn't just paint because they fancied it, and apart from, say, Van Goghs and stuff, but every piece of art or whatever you see in museums until the 20th century, someone said, would you do, if I give you some money, will you do this? And I think that's interesting, that's still, that sense of transaction as an artist is very, very powerful, because you don't want to let people down.
Yeah. That's really good. It's really good. That let me ask you one final question, my friend. And I know that I appreciate that the answer will change from day to day or minute to minute. But if you as a songwriter could have written any song in the world that's existed, what song would you have loved to have written or lived inside and brought into the universe?
It's a funny thing, like there's a couple of songs that is God Only Knows is one of them, because I think it's just astonishing. There's Wichita Lineman, which is interesting. I had the chance to meet him, and it wasn't finished. He was going to write another verse, but Glenn Campbell recorded it before he had finished it, which I think is really interesting. But I love that song, and the recording as well. But oh gosh, there's a song I like. I'm just going to let them bubble into my head. Bees Wing by Richard Thompson. I remember that blew my mind. I like nearly every song on Blood on the Tracks, even though I'm not a Dylan super fan, but for some reason a lot of the songs on that really,
it's great.
Wish I'd had a part in. Oh God, there's so many. I really, my favorite record is called I've got a 78 of it in a frame on my piano over there. It's Joe Stafford recorded a song called No Other Love, which is based on, is it Chopin or something like that? And it's really simple, but I really love that song, and I would have wished if I'd come up with that, I'd have been quite a cock a hoop.
Yeah. There's some good songs there. Okay, and one more. If you were to, as a collaborator who writes with lots of people, like if you could pick anybody you've not worked with before, or maybe you just might pick them again, who would be a dream collaboration?
Interesting question, because I was asked that when I was quite young by a fantastic A&R man who is always in my mind with anything I do, is a man called Nigel Grange, who's left us now, but he's the first proper deal that I had, and he signed people like 10cc, and when he was really young in his early 20s, Thin Lizzy, Rod Stewart. He was incredible. It was an adventure knowing this man, and and he said that to me, and he said, because I can make it happen. He could make it happen. He was powerful, and I couldn't think of someone. So I don't go out seeking it, but I love it when people come into my orbit and I work with them, and it doesn't matter if they're successful or not. So I'm not sure I can, even years and years later, I'm not sure I can answer that, because I was given the opportunity to go into the sweet shop and whoever I wanted, and I had loads of people that I really liked, and I just said to them, I don't know.
I quite like that answer, because that means you're open to who comes, and it's just like whoever. I've often, when I record other people, no matter what level of success they're at, I tend to think of them as being like a major artist who's about to make this massive record, and I've got this like opportunity to work with them. and also the other thing. So I think of them as like, I don't know, Elvis or McCartney, and I've got to just get it down. And the other thing,
That's I like that as well. And some of the best experiences I've had working on projects or with people have been things that no one will ever hear, but it doesn't.
Yeah,
It doesn't. You don't grade them in your head. It was just like, oh, do you remember when we did that? That was great. So I can't answer that, and that sounds a bit weird, but I can't.
no, it's good. It's any answers. Any answer is a good answer, and that is a very good answer in its own right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Boo, for your time, mate, and thanks for being part of the podcast.
I can hear the dog needs to go out, so
yeah, we're going to do a dog walks. But thank you for your time and for your insights into your songwriting.
Cheers.